Welcome back, Motorized Bike Enthusiast. In today's video, we're doing a Q&A as we go on a nice long ride to reply to some viewer comments and questions. We've been on a short break as it's a busy time of year, and there might be a few more breaks throughout the summer, but I promise you guys I'm still here. We still have a lot of videos planned, and there should be another one coming up next week. The background footage is a nice ride down a gravel road on the Bassett Blaster with the YD100. Mr. Stinson is curious if you can adapt a YD or BT100 top-in to a standard China doll lower. I don't have an exact measurement for you guys. I won't say it's impossible, but I have put them side by side before just to see the difference. I know that the cylinder itself is so wide that the skirt won't fit down into the lower of a China doll without removing a lot of material from the case itself. The transfer ports would be severely misaligned to the point where I don't think you could seal them. And the stud mounting pattern is a lot wider on the YD100. In order to adapt it to a standard bottom end, you would have to significantly remove material from the stud mounting holes, which might end up gouging into the walls of the cylinder itself. So, definitely not worth it in my opinion. Jonathan Wilson would like to know why I only use new bikes for my builds instead of looking on the used market. For me, this is just a matter of availability. It's not for a lack of trying or disinterest. Small town, there's basically no used market. I always check Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist as well as eBay every once in a while to see if anything pops up. They just never do. The nearest town with a significant used market is about a 2-hour drive away. They also happen to be the only place around here that has a bike shop which also might have used bikes. So if I come across a decent frame for a good price that'll fit a motor, I'll definitely grab it. Marksman Matthew wants to know what backpack I was using in my motorized bike endurance test. It's an Ozark Trail Yakutat. I'll leave a link down in the description. It's a nice little backpack. Straw Bandit would like to know what my opinion is of putting larger 4-stroke motors on trail bikes. With the 4-strokes, they're a bit bigger, bulkier, a little heavier. Make sure you secure it to the frame really well and reinforce it wherever you can. The frame itself really goes through hell on trails, even with the 2-strokes. So make sure that you get a nice, solid frame. You need to be able to stand up to the extra weight and power that those motors can provide. So the wheel set, axles, and the frame itself need to be very sturdy. Baked in Awake mentioned on our Velocity Stack video that for his build he did not use any kind of spacer between the Velocity Stack and the Carburetor, and he's been running it like that for years. With these bikes, you can do a lot of things that are not optimized and they'll run just fine. You can have a fuel filter on upside down, you can run the wrong heat range of spark plug, you can run without an air filter. The bikes will still run, but just because you're doing something for a long time doesn't mean you're doing it optimal. Try running the spacer between the stack and the carburetor and see if it makes a difference for you. It'll smooth out the airflow, take the turbulence away from that gap. So, just because something's running, it doesn't mean it's right. We have an open-ended question from Leonard about the 56-tooth sprocket. Here's my opinion in a nutshell. They're fantastic for trails, they're terrible for street. Unless you live in a place that's nothing but hills or you only want to ride trails, don't go with a 56-tooth sprocket. If you are just going to ride trails, they're fantastic, but you do run into cooling issues. As you're pushing the motor at higher RPMs with lower speeds, you need to address cooling by adding a larger head. When I ran a 56-tooth sprocket on the YD100, it was a beast of a trail bike, but it had overheating issues. Teeny Tykes suggests running low pressure such as 20 psi on the trail bike to absorb shock. On something with beefy rims and tubeless setups, this might work fine, but if you try and run low psi on rocky or bumpy terrain, there's a good chance you're going to get what's called a snake bite, and that's a pinch flat. And you may also damage the rim simply by putting a rock into it. So keep that in mind if you go low psi for trail rides. Dave H suggests putting an EBike Hub on one of my bikes to make it all-wheel drive and kind of a hybrid. I have considered doing this briefly in the past, and I may do it in the future, but I'm going to leave a link in the description to one of my subscribers who has an entire series of one of his builds, which he's done this to with pretty good success, and he deals with a lot of issues he ran into along the way, so go check him out. Ralph Jenkins is curious of what quality of motors you might find on Wish.com. I've never used Wish.com for a motor, but in my experience, the quality of these motors is the same throughout all websites. It's the fine details that you have to look forward to, as we mentioned in the Picking a Motorized Bike video. As long as you can find those details in a motor kit, you'll know that you're getting better quality overall versus the absolute budget ones. The website itself really doesn't matter much. In my experience, they all tend to be about the same. Alan Snack asked a question that at first seemed pretty obvious, but when I gave it a little more thought, there's a better answer. If you want to start a long journey on a motorized bike, I'm going to say it depends on where you live and what kind of traffic you have to deal with. If you're in an area with sparse traffic, then start early morning. Take advantage of cool weather and long daylight for obvious reasons. But if you happen to live in a location that has heavy traffic, wait for the morning rush hour to be over. Wait for a time when most people have gone to work, because this is just going to be a bit safer for motorized bike riders, considering everything we have to deal with. Deanna wants to know how you install a motorized bike kit on a beach cruiser if you've never done it before. Well, the first thing you do is watch a lot of YouTube videos about motorized bikes so you can get familiar with all the little quirks that these bikes have to offer. There are no special tools required to do this except for a chain breaker, which can handle 410 and 415 chains. Other than that, a basic toolkit's all you really need. Mike White is building a BT100 on a Stingray, and he wants to know what kind of performance muffler he should get. Now, if my memory is correct, the BT motors have a unique cylinder, which limits your ability to put on performance mufflers. So the best thing I can recommend is try and find somebody who already has one of these motors and see if they have any suggestions, because as far as I know, other than cutting at the header and welding on a pipe, there are no aftermarket options. But I'm sure someone in the comments will correct me if I'm wrong. But with that in mind, assuming this is your first build, don't worry about performance parts right now. Just build the bike, make sure it works, make sure it's reliable, deal with the break-in and all the little adjustments you're going to have to make before spending any more money than you need to. I've had a handful of people ask if I'm going to make merch or LA Hover stickers. I know you guys saw a couple LA Hover stickers. That was just a one-time batch that a friend made for me. I gave a couple of them away. I do plan on getting a bulk batch of those in so I can throw them in the giveaway bags when I do them with the stickers and the valve cap covers and other random goodies. So eventually. Stephen Brown would like to know what cheap bike I recommend to put a motor kit on. Now, you guys might assume I'd pick the Huffy Cranbrook due to its price, availability, and the fact that you can customize it. It has a lot of room to fit pretty much any motor you want in it. They're dead simple to work on and relatively solid bikes, as you can see from this video. Unfortunately, they're not very new builder friendly for one reason, and that's the coaster brake assembly. Whereas experienced builders will still find these to be a good value frame, new builders might want to steer clear of the Huffy Cranbrook. The problem with these is once you remove the coaster brake arm to install the rear sprocket, the cone nuts come out of adjustment, and it can be hard for a new builder to readjust those cone nuts properly so the rear tire is not too loose or too stiff, which can cause major issues down the road. A bike that I'm probably going to recommend to new builders from now on is the NGK B8HS. It's just about as available as a Cranbrook. I've been finding them on most Walmart racks in the United States. They're $150, but for that extra $50, I think they're definitely worth it because you don't have to deal with the coaster brake assembly, no cone nuts to adjust, and they have caliper-style brakes, which are just safer and easier to work with. Other than that, they're essentially a Huffy Cranbrook. You still have plenty of room to put big motors in them if you want. You can still customize them the same as you would a Cranbrook, and they're pretty simple to work on, barring the derailleur, but that's easy to figure out. So there you go. I would recommend the NGK B8HS. Look forward to my review coming up on that in about a week. Ja Rule brings up a misconception about these bikes. He says if they break down, just pedal. Whereas it might seem like you can do that, and you technically can. Anyone who's ever tried to pedal a motorized bike without the motor running know that it's a bit of a bear, and you run out of energy pretty quick. If you're in great shape, hey, more power to you, but most of us average Joes are going to find pedaling these bikes broken down for more than a mile is just not fun. Nugget of Life wants to know how to deal with a stripped out exhaust stud hole. There's probably better options out there than I'm going to recommend, but this is just what I would do if I was in your situation. Now, there's the obvious, is you can drill and tap it for a larger stud, but maybe that option's not available to you. If it was me, what I would do is order a new cylinder because they're relatively cheap, and while I'm waiting for the new cylinder to come in, if I need my bike right now, I'd get some high heat JB Weld, a fresh stud, or at the very least flip your current stud around to use the best threads on it that you can, fill the hole with JB Weld, screw the stud into what's left of the threading, and let it cure. And then I would just ride that until my new cylinder arrives. Who knows? In some situations, the JB Weld might hold up permanently. That stuff's pretty strong, and you might end up just having a spare cylinder on hand for when something else breaks. When putting the muffler back on the studs, I wouldn't screw it on really tight. I would use a double nut method to hold it onto the stud. That way you're not trying to pull the stud back out of the JB Weld. Patrick Palmer would like to know what my recommendations are for performance motors, and I'm guessing that he's hinting at me doing a video about performance motors, and unfortunately I just lack that experience. But what I've noticed from looking at stock kits to people who sell the quote-unquote performance kits like Stage 1, Stage 2, and all that good stuff is they're essentially just stock kits where they've replaced certain parts with higher quality components. I believe that the best performance kits you can get are a quality stock kit that you've replaced with better parts. A user who we'll call RV, so I don't butcher his name, asked if I've considered diving deeper into motorized bike life and doing conversion kits for like the Minarelli cylinder and a couple of other variants. I simply lack the knowledge and the tooling to do these kind of conversions. Someday in the future I'm sure I'll dive into them, but for now I'm just sticking with stock kits and bolt-on parts. Bry the Bike Guy asked what my favorite color of clear coat is. This is definitely going to be Electric Blues. It's a combination of tree hugger tears and Karen self-righteousness. It's really a tricky one to get because you gotta bottle these up and shake vigorously. Leonard asked if LA is for Louisiana. It is, and if I ever build a proper hover bike, then the channel's name will finally make sense. It's always a vast post of entertainment when an older individual comes on talking about how he's old, and the internet is the devil, he hates YouTube, and how the world is changing. Bro, too long didn't read. I'm just trying to help people. FM Finlay wants to know why his brake pads are wearing down so quickly, and although the answer to this question is obvious, there's a better answer. You put a motor on a bike which was originally designed to go 10, 12 miles an hour. Your bike's heavier, you're going faster, and you're probably using your brakes more often than you need to. The real answer here is your riding style needs to change. You can't ride your bike like a motorcycle or a car, where there's a stop sign coming up and you're on the gas, and then hit the brakes. The characteristic of a motorized bike means they have more drag due to all the components we've added to the bike, and you need to use this drag to your advantage. When you're riding your daily routine and you know that a stop sign's coming up, go ahead and just let off the gas and let the bike coast as much as it can to the stop, and then use your brakes at the last minute when you absolutely need to. This will save your brake pads immensely. Now, I know somebody in the comments would probably chime in and say just get disc brakes, and yes, that is an option, but for a lot of us it's not. It's expensive and it requires modifications of the bike. If you can get disc brakes with some beefy setups, then great, more power to you. But if you're stuck using caliper style brakes like a lot of us, change your riding style. Don't just be on the gas all the time. Coast when you can coast. Not only will this save your wallet because you're not replacing brake pads all the time, it means that your brakes will be available when you need to make a true emergency stop. And as a side note, when you are coasting to a stop, make sure you pull in the clutch if you're using a two-stroke. Don't coast with the motor engaged. If you have a two-stroke, that's bad for the motor. I Miss the Misery has a question about one-piece jugs. His motor kit came with a one-piece, and he wanted to know if there's a performance difference, or really what difference there is. We've gone over this in several videos. In my experience, there's not really much, if any, of a performance difference between the two and one-piece jug. It just means that you lack the ability to do certain upgrades on the head. But in a nutshell, you can replace one-piece jugs on most motors with two pieces. It might require opening up the stud mounts and dealing with that, but from what I've seen, the bottom end of a single piece jug case has the same stud pattern as a two piece. They're just smaller, so you got to open them up and tap and dive. Lord Rock has a pretty cool idea, and that's some kind of a gas meter in these tanks, which is definitely something that would come in handy. I was thinking maybe a gas cap with a gauge on it, but if anybody has any ideas, let me know. We had a great ride today, right up until we hit some red mud, which caked rocks and dirt all over the chain, causing it to jump off the sprocket. The clearance between the chain and the tire is so shallow that anytime you get mud building up on these, it just causes all sorts of headaches. Anyways, it loosened the chain up because of that, so we decided not to push it any further and just head back home. That's going to do it for the Q&A in today's video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, ride safe.